IVM.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I'm Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach. And today we're going to be talking about mindfulness in the workplace. Now, this is something that is so critical for us to learn because, well, we're so distracted all the time. Half the time is spent in distractions, wasted time. And then we say, oh my God, I have no time. I'm going to work late into the night. And it just becomes one endless stream of problems. So today with us, we have S Venkatesh. Now, we've already done a podcast with him on creativity. If you haven't heard that, do hear that after this one. Today, we're going to be talking about mindfulness in the workplace. So, S. Venkatesh, welcome to the Habit Coach podcast.
Thank you, Ashdin. Wonderful to be here on your show.
Venkatesh, tell us a little bit about yourself so that we can set context and then jump into our topic.
Sure. So, I grew up actually, part of my childhood was in Tanzania. I still have vivid memories of the national park visits and everything. Part of my childhood was in a small town in West Bengal called Farakka, where we would have to cross the Ganges every day to get to school. And the Ganges was 2.5 kilometers wide there.
You used to walk 2.5 kilometers across a river?
No, cross it on our school bus.
Huh.
But it was something to cross the Ganges every day getting to school.
Wow. Okay. I thought this was one of those I used to put my books on top of my head and walk across. This kind of thing. No, it's not that. There was a school bus.
No such story. It was a school bus and all, okay. But it was just like a really beautiful place. The Ganges was at its widest. Farakka is close to not far from the delta. So it was 2.5 kilometers wide.
Okay.
And then the latter part of my schooling was in Delhi. I did my engineering, and frankly, because that's what a lot of other people did, I did my MBA after that. And I think along the way, I harbored this desire to write. But, after I started working for some years, that was sort of dormant. So my first job was in the stock market.
Okay.
I joined Credit Suisse and then worked with Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan as well. And, this whole adrenaline roller coaster world, it was, great. Somewhere along the way, I realized that I would have to make time for writing if I wanted to pursue that as well. So slowly I started making time. I worked with a couple of private equity firms making investments in a lot of companies. And over the last 6 years, I've been running a management consulting firm, advising companies on strategy and so on. And my first book, Kalkut, was published in 2018. The second one was published last year, Agniban. The third one, incidentally, is a thriller linked to the stock market. So that will be out end of this year.
Oh, okay. Highs and lows.
Yes. That's a nice name, by the way. I might just steal it, but yeah. Yeah.
Lovely. So Venkatesh, in all of this, how did the idea of, mindfulness, or how did you discover mindfulness in working in so many different aspects of life?
Sure. So this is actually a journey of sorts in itself. So my first exposure to mindfulness was frankly in my third year of engineering. So I was at IIT Delhi and there was a professor who was a mindfulness instructor as well. So, I attended this Vipassana 10-day retreat in Jaipur and 10 days of complete silence. Frankly, some of us had gone because, it was free boarding and lodging. And little did we know that, it was also 10 days of not being allowed to talk or read or anything else. But jokes apart, it was a life-changing experience. I think it was the first time I actually got a chance to see my mind as distinct from myself and to also realize that many of the time, it's like somebody who's behind a screen versus somebody who's in front of it. He doesn't even know that the screen exists.
Correct.
So the mind is like that. You have your mind. It's like, think of it as like, two balls or something. So you're there, then your mind is there. And through the mind's eye, you're seeing the rest of the world. If you don't even know these two balls exist, you're just doing what the mind tells you. It's sort of, the mind is the boss and you're just following instructions.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I attended this mindfulness retreat, forgot about it for a good, 10 years. Then I attended a mindfulness retreat again. It also coincided with the period when I started writing.
Okay.
So mindfulness contributed a lot. In fact, I can almost go to the extent of saying that if it was not for mindfulness meditation, I wouldn't have actually ended up writing either of the two books that I've written so far. It really helped me get ideas, get focused. It helped me carry the thread from one day to another. And so that's how these books came about. But along the way, I actually realized, and I've been a regular practitioner now for about 6 years.
The second was also Vipassana?
Yes, second was also Vipassana. And I'll talk about it. There are various mindfulness techniques. Vipassana is not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been a regular practitioner now for 6 years. And I've realized that the applications of this are not just in unlocking creativity or in writing, but also, it has applications in our professional worlds as well. I come from the stock markets. I'm still an avid stock market investor. And I've realized that there are just so many areas that mindfulness can be applied in. And these are not some esoteric things we are talking about. This is tangible stuff that you can actually do and feel the impact of literally by the day.
This one is very fascinating. Tell me a little bit more about how mindfulness helped you with the stock market.
Oh, I'm actually going to write a book about it, but I'll give you a sneak peek into what I have in mind. So a few things, right? So I spent the first 15 years of my career in some ways linked to the stock markets. The first 8 years was all these investment banks. And I used to present stock ideas to clients who were investors. And these investors were like small investors to very large, hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, mutual funds, big international powerhouses. I realized that there is a certain attitude that underlies each of these. And that attitude is not necessarily conducive to making money on the stock markets. That attitude is more geared towards just sort of feeding into a system which is already working for certain people. In the last 6, 7 years that I've been meditating more regularly, I've realized there's a whole alternative way of looking at the stock market. So I'll give you examples, right? The first and biggest superpower is being able to see things with a long-term horizon.
Lovely.
When you hear that somebody is in the stock market, what is the first question you ask him? क्या लग रहा है stock market का? क्या होगा अगले साल में? बढ़ेगा कि कम होगा? These questions are irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether the stock market goes up or down in the near term. What matters is, can you find a company which will give you good returns over a 5 or 10 year period? Because you're going to live very long. Hopefully, all of us are going to live long. And by long, we are talking decades. So why are you bothered about what's going to happen the next year? The second thing is, people telling you, I think there might be a 20% correction. Maybe you should wait. 20% correction. If you're investing for 10, 20 years, you're talking about multiplying your capital 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, 20 times. A 20% correction is meaningless. That doesn't mean you shouldn't time. But the truth is that if you look at the track record of people who've timed the market, it's pretty bad.
Correct.
That's another thing, humbly realizing your own mistakes. So I think mindfulness just enabled me to just be humble and realize what I was not good at. And I was not good at timing the market. I am not good at timing the market. I have absolutely no clue what the market's going to do in the next 6 months. And it's very tempting, in my investment banking jobs, you can appear very knowledgeable. I can give you a really convincing sounding argument about why the market will go up in 6 months or why the market will crash in 6 months. They'll all sound convincing.
Correct.
But the truth is, none of them have their foundations in truth. So you stick with the truth. The truth means being okay to say, I don't know. In fact, I think we should say, I don't know more often. We try and be know-it-alls all the time.
Correct.
Who's going to win the war in Ukraine? I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. What's going to happen with commodities, inflation? I don't know. I really don't know what's going on in the minds of the OPEC members. I wish I could, get into the heads of state, but the truth is I have no clue. And just realizing what you don't know, for instance, really helps. Warren Buffett's called it the circle of competence. You play best when you play in the realm of what you can talk about, what you can understand, and don't play. So even now, I give in to temptation sometimes. It's tempting to, for instance, buy certain commodity stocks because you think commodity might go up. But the truth is that it's much easier to just find good businesses, stick with them 5, 10 years, and that's how you can make money. So it's a long-winded answer because it's a topic close to my heart, but I hope I've been able to convey it.
I love this because this reminded me of a conversation I was having yesterday. So my entire school group, school groups are typically, 100 kids now that have grown up. And some days they're experts on Warcraft. Some days they're experts on what is happening in cricket. Some days they're expert and everyone's giving their, this is how they should have done it. And, if I was there, I would have done. Arey, Baba, but this is totally out of your circle of competence.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Why are we even listening to you?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so funny on how quickly people change into different expertise.
It's actually okay to say, you know what, I'm just shooting the breeze. I'm just, I'm beating my buddies. I'm just going to pontificate on everything. But be clear that you're just doing this just to let off steam and don't confuse it with your own, don't believe your own bullshit.
Correct. Absolutely.
It's dangerous if you give this gyan and next day go and, make stock purchases based on this. That's when there is a problem. Giving gyan is fine. It's, if it's letting off steam.
In fact, the mindfulness aspect with the stock market reminded me of a thing that Warren Buffett says. And so the first thing he says is that my secret to investing and on getting rich is not dying. So that is the same thing that you said, that just live long and you will get your triples and quadruples. But the other thing that he says is that if you don't have the ability to hang in there when it goes down, when you see everyone losing money and losing their shit, this market is not for you. And that's actually where mindfulness comes in, right? When you can, like you said, go behind the screen and actually see, this is what my mind is thinking. This is what the reality is.
Yeah.
Is there any truth here? We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Hello. It's been another great week here on the IVM Podcasts Network. On This Round is on Me, Gauri explores the power of networking with Abha Bakaya, founder and CEO of Ladies Who Lead. On Nankari, Sadaf and Archit go on a virtual food walk with Anubhav Sapra, founder of Delhi Food Walks. On Misconduct, Ragvi and Nisha tell us about the fascinating life story of China's only female empress, Wu Zetian. On The Longest Constitution, Priya analyzes the First Amendment to the Indian Constitution. And on Marathi Khidkitun, the Deshmukhs explore museums all around the world. We've got some exciting news for you. IVM Podcasts has just launched its merch, and our first line is out now. Head to the IVM Podcasts website and click on the shop tab to check out our first collection of t-shirts. Do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platforms you're listening on. And you can also check us out on YouTube. We're also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it in. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week. SBI Life Insurance, Apne Liye, Apno Ke Liye. Jupiter, a digital banking app. Capgemini, get the future you want. Intel vPro, built for business. And Intel, future banao wonderful with Intel-powered laptops.
Welcome back. All right, let's jump into the conversation.
So what you said is, you've raised a very interesting point. It's the Rudyard Kipling's poem, right? If you can, I'm trying to remember the exact lines. If you can keep your head while all others about you are losing theirs.
Correct. Absolutely.
And that's really what it is. So, every profession, I've realized, I think it's the the author of Dilbert, Scott Adams, who said that everything can be done. You just have to find the price and pay the price. So I don't know, maybe in law, if you want to become a lawyer, the price to pay is you have to read a lot, understand a lot, put in 14, 16-hour work days. That's the price. And if you don't want to put in those type of work days, maybe you should reconsider the profession.
Correct.
Right? If you want to, become a musician, you have to be okay with not getting any validation, not getting any money. If you want to be a writer, oh God, there's 1,000 things you have to be okay with, but you get the gist, right? So if you want to be a stock market investor, you have to have a strong stomach. You have to be okay with halving your money and being okay about it. You see all the great investors, Warren Buffett, and many times they were 40, 50% down, even closer home investors like Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. There are many times when their stocks have, gone down a lot. You have to steel yourself and be okay with those times.
Correct.
And, mindfulness is not just in the stock market, even in our workplaces, leadership, business, all these areas it can be applied. Yeah.
In fact, how do we bring mindfulness now into our daily lives, especially from a work point of view?
So what is mindfulness really, right? So of course, one of them is the physical process of meditating. And I would strongly urge people, irrespective of their religious denomination, to try and learn meditation. There are many techniques. Choose whichever one seems to appeal to you. It doesn't matter. The second part is, what is it really? It's two things to my mind, the way I have understood it in my own practice. The first part is being aware. Many of the times, 90% of the time, we're not even aware what is driving us. Somebody is going and fighting with a colleague in the office because 3 years ago, the colleague said something which seemed like, he was ignoring his work. You're not even aware that happened 3 years ago. You've forgotten about it, but somewhere in your mind, it's still driving your interaction with that person.
Correct.
Maybe there's somebody who keeps quitting jobs because he's not able to get along with bosses. Now, it's fine once, it's fine twice. If you quit 8 jobs repeatedly because you're not able to get along with bosses, you have to think through, what is your relationship with authority figures? Was there an authority figure in your life that you had trouble with? Maybe a parent. So The first part is awareness, understanding what drives your actions, understanding why you're reacting a certain way to certain things. And slowly you're trying to go behind the screen. You're trying to see what's the driver of each of those activities of yours, each of those beliefs. You may not want to start an entrepreneurial venture, even though you desperately want to, but you may not actually get around to doing it because somewhere, maybe as a kid, you could not afford to fail. You have seen yourself as somebody who always has to be successful. So it's nice to dream about an entrepreneurial venture. It's not so nice to step in and expose yourself to the possibility of failure.
Correct.
So I think that's the first part, awareness.
And that's a big one. That's a difficult one to get.
That's the most difficult one. It's like I liken it to it's like you're in a cave and you're not even aware you're in a cave because there's a big boulder blocking the entrance and you make peace with whatever's there in the cave. But somewhere there is this big, sunlight and everything else, the whole world waiting for you. But for that, you have to first move that boulder. Now, the first part is you're not even aware that the boulder is there. And even when you get on this mindfulness path, here and there, you glimpse the possibility of, maybe there is something up there which I can move. But it takes years of work on yourself to be able to actually move that boulder. But once you move it, it just unlocks a whole bunch of things in your life and certainly in your professional life. So, I mean, just as an example, right? This is what I said about somebody not wanting to start an entrepreneurial venture because of fear of failure. People can spend decades fearing failure and not doing certain things. So yeah, awareness is the most important part.
Awareness, breaking it up, seeing where your blocks are, knowing who you are. I think that is a very difficult one.
Yeah.
And like step one is where I'm seeing the most difficulty coming in this aspect. All right, lovely. So step one, awareness, who you are, break down whatever the barriers are so far.
Yeah.
Lovely. Then what do we do next?
So step two, and I mean, there are only two steps here.
Oh,
is the step two is to then act with the right motivation.
Okay.
So what happens is 99% of the time, we just act on a reflex action type of thing. So, you do your, as a kid, even as a teenager, it's fine. You do what society expects of you. So in my case, I did my engineering and my MBA. But at some point, we just realized that, hey, everybody else is, pursuing, I don't know, say investment banking. So I'm doing it. Or, maybe one is supposed to, aspire for having a big apartment in a particular part of town. So let me work towards that. Or maybe everybody is doing a startup nowadays, so I'll do a startup. Even that can be peer pressure. Or it's like, I'm running a startup. I don't want it to scale up. That's a possibility, right? It's like somebody who's running a small bookstore in Goa or something. He's like, I don't want it to scale up. I don't want to set up this big chain where people get lost. I want to set up this cozy bookshop where I can myself sit and read a book. Maybe that's fine. But unfortunately, that desire is buried beneath, hey, you're going to have 3 bankers coming to you and presenting why you should expand your chain of bookstores. You're going to have 2 consultants coming and telling you how to scale up. You're going to be bombarded by YouTube videos on how to scale up your business. And so somewhere the motivation, the inner motivation gets lost. And you're instead working with a series of impressions that are hitting you every day. And these impressions are hitting us every minute of the day. It's like you tell a friend that, hey, I'm going to XYZ place for lunch. And like, why would you want to go there? And poof, that is somewhere playing on your mind.
Correct.
So these impressions are bombarding us. To be able to retain the pristinity of that inner compass in the middle of these various impressions. So think of it like a big storm around you and you're trying to protect that bubble. You need to protect that bubble and let your actions as much as possible come from that deep inner motivation. When that happens, that's when those actions can have the biggest consequences. Yeah.
So knowing that reason why you're doing what you're doing is that step 2. So step 1 is awareness on who you are and why you the way that you are. The second is figuring out why you're doing what you're doing.
And sorry, I would say figuring out is still part of step 1 because it's understanding. Step 2 is letting the right action emerge from the right motivation.
Okay. All right.
Rather than letting the action emerge from the wrong motivation. So instead of that, you let the dust settle a little bit and then act with conscious motivation from your deep inner compass. Yeah.
So Venkatesh, now there are people listening to this podcast who are stuck in a job that they don't like. They are waiting for that clock to hit 5:30 or 6:30 or 7:30, whenever it's okay for them to leave and get out of there. Now, they walk in with resentment, they leave with resentment. How do you bring mindfulness to something like that?
So I think if I was to give practical tips, I would say the first thing this person, he or she needs to do is tune into their inner compass. That's the first thing. Because it looks to me like, suppose I take this sort of persona that you've described. This person is clearly having a lot of conflict. He or she is doing something for 8 hours, but feeling sick about it. There needs to be clarity of inner purpose. So how do you find this inner compass? I think the first thing to do is either learn meditation, or if not, just preferably in the early part of the day, do something that you deeply enjoy. It could be just taking a walk in the woods. It could be going swimming. It could be, playing a game.
Playing with your pet,
playing with your pet or your kids even, but let that be cordoned off time. Let that be sacrosanct time. It should not be time which should be intruded by, if your boss is going to message you at that time, just put your phone on silent, or just say that, I don't know, you're having a long shower or whatever the hell, but just don't let that time be intruded upon by anything. Choose a time of the day, preferably in the first half, preferably early morning. And what that time does is it reconnects you with your inner being. Once you reconnect to your inner compass, then you start realizing why you're doing certain things.
Okay.
You may realize that, hey, I'm in this job because I need to save up X amount of money. And you know what? Then tough luck. Just suck it up and make peace with the job. You understand if this job is going to have trade-offs, but I'm going to wait till I make X. But then be clear about the X. Don't just let the X become 2X and 3X and 5X. And that's not right. The second possibility is you may say, hey, I'm stuck in this job because I'm reluctant to face change. And, all that you may need to do is tread carefully, put your foot in the water, maybe start talking to headhunters, finding another job. Third possibility is maybe you are just in this state of continuous resentment because that's who you are as a person. Maybe not just at work, but even outside, you like to be in the state of, not being able to step out and be your own person, but yet not be able to make peace with things. And somewhere you're in this resentment zone.
Correct.
What then you can do is, as you start making time for yourself and taking joy in that short half an hour pleasure, you'll find that joy spilling over into your day. And you'll realize, what, actually, I'm the only one who's getting, rammed because of being resentful. So you'll slowly start giving up that resentment when you start to love yourself. And in a way, that's what that half an hour or 1 hour, teaches you to do. I'm not a big fan of people saying, hey, if you're stuck in this rut and you don't like your boss or your job, quit. Or, because each person is different. To one person, you may say, hey, quit and take up another job in the same industry. To one person, you may say, hey, you want to actually start a company. Why don't you do that? To another person, it might be, why don't you work on your own feelings of resentment? What have those come from? Maybe something in childhood. And
Correct.
To another person, it might just be, everything's fine. You just need to take time for yourself. Just take a break. It's just as simple as that in some cases. So it's different shoes for different folks. But to know which shoe fits you, you have to start making that time. Yeah, long-winded answer, but I hope that answered your question.
No, that's very interesting, because when you bucket yourself into one of these three categories, on which one are you that you need to figure out, then there is a change that can take place. And in fact, maybe to the third category, the one that is resentful, I would add another thing, and love your thoughts on this. Resentment of your job is now something that I'm seeing as people thinking of as cool. It's cool to be resentful of your job, or life sucks, or same shit, new day, that kind of stuff. And it's just becoming the same narrative on like, for example, Instagram and your social platform. And it's something that I find very scary.
Yeah.
And especially when we talk about mindfulness at work, if your mind is so full, all puns intended, of these kinds of thoughts, how are you ever going to enjoy it?
Oh yeah, totally. It is, even to me, it is quite disturbing to see this sort of skeptical, cynical, crib marrowing type attitude. I think this is what happens when the sense of wonder is lost.
Yeah.
Just recapture that sense of wonder. And sometimes there is also kinship in numbers, right? It's so great to get together with a few colleagues and bitch about the job or whatever. But yeah, I think once somebody told me this, that, aap ucha prakash dekhoge. So, if you see the bigger light, you will get over the smaller preoccupation. So that bigger light is the light of, sense of wonder and just joy of creativity and all that. When you see that, then you'll stop getting, it's like, I'm going to risk, getting ostracized for saying this. It's like saying कि आपने वो, did you eat the Delhi ka papri chaat or not? If you eat the papri chaat made in any other city, I mean, it's not the same thing.
Not
So
the
once
same.
you eat the Delhi ka papri chaat, you'll not feel like eating the papri chaat in any other city. It's like that.
Correct. Absolutely. So it's understanding what it is, why you're doing this, clearing up your mind from all this clutter, those 3 C's, complaining, criticizing, comparing. If you get these things out of your life and start focusing on that wonder, I think, and you put it so well, wonder is missing. That, wow. So we need to bring that focus back in and wonder into our life.
Yeah,
all right.
Totally.
Lovely. Venkatesh, this was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for coming and sharing this with us. How can people continue this conversation with you? How can people find out more about you, your books?
Sure. So my website is svenkatesh.in. All my social media handles are mentioned there. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, everything. So yeah, viewers can get in touch with me.
Fantastic. And we'll have the links in the show notes below. Sure. Venkatesh, thank you so much for coming on the Habit Coach podcast.
Thank you, Ashdin. This has been wonderful.
Awesome.
Now, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am at Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. We have a brand new habit coaching online course, quizzes, videos, and a lot more on the website awesome180.com. So check it out now.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
इन्फ्लेशन, फिस्कल डेफिसिट, जीडीपी, एमएसपी, एनपीए, इक्विटी मार्केट वगैरह वगैरह। दोस्तों, हमने सारे शब्द टीवी या अखबार में जरूर देखे होंगे या फिर सुने होंगे, पर हम में से कितने लोग हैं जो ये जानते हैं कि इन सब का सीधा प्रभाव पड़ता है हमारी सैलरी पर, हमारे इंक्रीमेंट पर और कमबख्त हमारे खर्चों पर। दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है अभिनव त्रिवेदी और मैं बात कर रहा हूँ इक्का दुक्का इकोनॉमी पॉडकास्ट से, जहाँ पे इस तरह के इकोनॉमिक और फाइनेंशियल टर्म्स को मैं जोड़ूंगा सीधा आपकी जेब से। हर मंगलवार एक नया एपिसोड सुने IVM पॉडकास्ट की वेबसाइट, ऐप या फिर किसी भी अन्य पॉडकास्ट प्लेटफॉर्म पर।